Khureb BeRuakh, Sword of the Spirit, narrated and interpreted by Wendy.
Acts. Chapter 1. The former treatise I have made, O Theophilus, of all that Jeshojehu began both to do and teach, until the day in which he was taken up. After that, he gave commandments to the apostles that he had chosen through the Ruach Kodesh, also to whom he showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen by them for 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of Elohim, and being assembled together, commanding them that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father, which he said, "You have heard of me, for truly Yochanan baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Ruach Kodesh not many days from now." Therefore, when they came together, they asked of him, saying, "Adonai, at the time will you restore the kingdom of Yisrael again?" And he answered them, "It is not for you to know the times or the seasons, which the Father has put in his own power. However, you will receive power after the Ruach Kodesh comes upon you, and you will witness for me both in Jerusalem and in all Yehuda and in Shamerun, also to the outermost part of the earth." And when he had spoken these things, while they were held, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. And while they looked attentively toward the heavens, as he went up, behold, 2 men stood by with white apparel, who also said, "You men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into the heavens? This same Jeshojehu, who is taken up from you into the heavens, will come in like manner as you have seen him go into the heavens." Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, which is near Jerusalem, observing a shabat's journey. And when they had come in, they went into an upper room, where Kepa and Jacob and Yochanan and Andrai, Philip and Tama, Bartholomew and Matityehu, Jacob the son of Geleth, and Shimon Zeleat, and Yehuda the brother of Jacob, dwelled together. These all continued with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women, and Mary the mother of Jeshojehu, and with his brethren. And during those days Kepa stood up in the midst of the Talmudim, and said, "The number of names together were about 12. Men, brethren, this scripture needs to be fulfilled, which the Ruach Kodesh spoke before by the mouth of David concerning Yehuda, which was a guide for those who took Jeshojehu, for he was numbered with us, and had obtained part of this ministry. Now this man purchased a field with the reward of iniquity, and falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known to all the dwellers at Jerusalem, such that the field is called in their proper tongue Asadama, which is to say, the field of blood. For it is written in the Supper of Psalms, "Let his habitation be desolate, and let no man dwell in it, and let another take his place." This is why these men who have accompanied us the entire time that Adonai Jeshojehu went in and out among us, being from the baptism of Yochanan to the day that he was taken up from us, someone must be ordained to be a witness for us of his resurrection. And they appointed 2, Yusuf called Barsabbas, who was surnamed Justus, and Matthias. And they prayed and said, "O Adonai, you know the hearts of everyone. Show which of these 2 you have chosen, so that he may take part of this ministry and apostleship, from which Yehuda fell by transgression, so that he might go into his own place. And they put forth their lots, and the lot fell upon Matthias. Therefore he was numbered among the 11 apostles. Chapter 2. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from the heavens like a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them cloven tongues like of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were filled with the Ruach Kodesh, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Ruach gave them utterance. Furthermore, devout Yehudim from every nation were dwelling at Jerusalem. Now when this was heard outside, the multitude came together, and were confounded, because every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are all of these who speak not Gilalim? And how does every man hear in our own tongue, in which we were born? Parthians, and Madai, and Alami, and the dwellers of Mesopotamia, and in Yehuda, and Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, and Pamphylia, in Mitzrayim, and in parts of Liba, around Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Yehudim, and proselytes, Cretes, and Abiaim. We hear them speak the wonderful works of Elohim in our tongues. And they were amazed, and were in doubt, saying one to another, What does this mean? Others mocked, saying, These men are full of new wine. But Kappa, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said to them, You men of Yehuda, and all who dwell at Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and hearken to my words. For they are not drunk, like you suppose, seeing it is the 3rd hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken of by the prophet Jual. And it will come to pass in the last days, saith Elohim, I will pour out my BeRuack upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. And in those days I will pour out my BeRuack upon my servants, and upon my handmaids, and they will prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. And it will come to pass that whoever will call on the name of he who exists will be saved. You men of Yisrael, hear these words, Yehoshua the Nazarite, a man who demonstrated miracles and wonders and signs from Elohim for you, which were done by him, the all in the midst of you, as you know. He, the designated and predetermined plan of all, was delivered by lawless hands to be crucified and slain. Loosening the pains of death, Elohim has raised him up, because it is not possible that it would hold him. For David speaks concerning him, I foresaw Adonai, always before my face, for he is on my right hand, so that I will not be moved. Therefore my spirit rejoiced, and my tongue was glad. Also my flesh will rest in hope, because you will not leave my soul in hell, nor will you suffer your Holy One to see corruption. You have made the ways of life known to me. You will make me full of joy with your countenance. Men and brethren, let me freely speak to you of the patriarch, David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre is with us to this day. Therefore, being a prophet, and knowing that Elohim had sworn an oath to him, that the fruit of his loins according to the flesh, he would raise up the Mashiach to sit upon his throne. Previously seeing this, he spoke of the resurrection of the Mashiach, that his soul was not left in hell, nor did his flesh see corruption. Elohim has raised up this Yahushua, of whom we are all witnesses. Therefore, being exalted by the right hand of Elohim, and having received the promise of the Ruach Kodesh by the Father, he has poured out this, which you now see and hear. For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he himself said, Yahweh said to my Adonai, sit on my right hand, until I make your foes your footstool. Therefore, let all the house of Yisrael securely know that Elohim has made this same Yahushua, whom you have crucified, both Adonai and Mashiach. Now when they heard this, they were pricked in the heart, and said to Kepha and to the rest of the apostles, Men, brethren, what should we do? Then Kepha said to them, Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, for the remission of sins, and you will receive the gift of the Ruach Kodesh. For the promise is to you, and to your children, and to all who are afar off, as many as the Adonai of our Elohim will call. And with many other words he testified and encouraged, saying, Save yourselves from this perverse generation. Then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that same day about 3,000 souls were added. And they continued with the apostles' teaching and worship and fellowship, and in breaking of bread, and in prayers. And reverence came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all who believed were together, and had all things communal. And they sold their possessions and goods, and divided them to everyone, as each man had need. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, and broke bread from house to house, eating their grain with gladness and singleness of heart, praising Elohim, and having favor with all the people. And Adonai added to the assembly daily those who would be saved. Chapter 3. Now Kepha and Yochanan went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. And a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried daily, whom they laid at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms of those who entered into the temple. Seeing Kepha and Yochanan about to go into the temple, he asked alms. Therefore Kepha fastened his eyes upon him with Yochanan, saying, Look upon us. And he gave heed to them, expecting to receive something of them. Then Kepha said, Silver and gold I have none, but such as I have, I give you. In the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, the Mishrit, rise up and walk. Then he took him by the hand and lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. Furthermore, he leaped up standing, and walked, and entered with them into the temple, walking and leaping and praising Elohim. And all the people saw him walking and praising Elohim. And they knew that it was him who sat for alms at the beautiful gate of the temple, and they were filled with wonder and amazement by that which had happened to him. And as the lame man who was healed held Kepha and Yochanan, all the people ran together to them, to the porch that is called Shelumah's great wonder. And when Kepha saw it, he answered to the people, You men of Yisrael, why do you marvel at this? Or why do you look so earnestly upon us, as if our own power or holiness we had made this man walk? The Elohim of Abraham and of Yitzhak and of Jacob, the Elohim of our fathers, has glorified his son, Yahushua, whom you delivered up and denied him in the presence of Pilate, when he wanted to let him go. But you denied the holy and righteous one, and desired a murderer to be granted to you. and killed the Prince of Life, whom Elohim has raised up from the dead, of which we are witnesses. And by faith in his name he has made this man strong, whom you see and know. Truly, the faith which is by him has given him this perfect soundness in the presence of you all. And now, brethren, I know that you did it by ignorance, as did your rulers also. But those things which Elohim had previously revealed by the mouth of all his prophets, that the Mashiach would suffer, he has fulfilled it. Therefore, repent and be converted, so that your sins may be blotted out, when the time of refreshing will come from the presence of Yahweh. And he will send Yahushua HaMashiach, who preached to you previously, whom the heavens must receive until the times of restitution of all things, which Elohim has spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets, since the world began. For truly, Moshe said to the fathers, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up a prophet for you, of your brethren, like to me. You shall hearken all things whatever he says to you. And it shall come to pass that every soul who will not hearken that prophet will be destroyed from among the people. Indeed, all the prophets from Shemuel and those who follow after, as many as have spoken, have likewise foretold of these days. You are the children of the prophets, and of the covenant which Elohim made with our fathers, saying to Abraham, and in your seed all the kindreds of the earth will be blessed. Then Elohim raised up his servant. He sent him to you first, to bless you by turning each of you away from your iniquities. And as they spoke to the people, the priests and the captains of the temple and the Zadukim came upon them, being grieved that they taught the people and preached through Yahushua the resurrection from the dead. And they laid hands upon him and put them in hold until the next day, for it was now evening-tide. Furthermore, many of them which heard the word believed, and the number of men was about 5,000. And it came to pass on the morrow that their rulers and elders and scribes, and Ananias the high priest, and Caiaphas, and Johanan, and Alexander, and as many as were of the kindred of the high priest, were gathered together at Jerusalem. And when they had set them in the midst, they asked, By what power or by what name have you done this? Then, filled with the Ruach Kodesh, Caiaphas said to them, You rulers of the people, and elders of Yisrael, if we are examined today for the good deed done to the impotent man, by what means he is made whole, let it be known to you all, and to all the people of Yisrael, that by the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, the Nazarite, whom you crucified, whom Elohim raised from the dead, by him this man stands here whole before you. This is the stone which was not set by you builders, which has become the head of the corner. Nor is there salvation by any other, for there is no other name under the heavens given among men, by which we must be saved. Now when they saw the boldness of Caiaphas and Johanan, and perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant men, they marveled. And they took knowledge of them, that they had been with Yahushua. And seeing the man who was healed standing with them, they could say nothing against it. But when they had commanded them to go aside out of the council, they conferred among themselves, saying, What will we do with these men? For truly a notable miracle has been done by them, manifesting to all those who dwell in Jerusalem, and we cannot deny it. But so that it does not spread any further among the people, let us straitly threaten them, so that they do not speak to anyone in this name from now on. Therefore they called them, and commanded them not to speak nor teach in the name of Yahushua at all. However, Kepa and Yochanan answered and said to them, Which is right in the sight of Elohim, to hearken to you more than to Elohim? Judge yourselves, for we can only speak the things which we have seen and heard. Then, after they threatened them further, they let them go because of the people, finding nothing that they might punish them. For everyone glorified Elohim for what was done. For the man was over 40 years old, on whom this miraculous healing was showed. And being let go, they went to their own company, and reported all that the chief priests and elders had said to them. And when they heard that, they lifted up their voice to Elohim with one accord, and said, Yehovah, you are Elohim, who has made the heavens, the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, who by the mouth of your servant David has said, Why do the nations rage, and the people imagine vain things? The kings of the earth stood up, and the rulers were gathered together against Adonai and against his Mashiach. For of a truth against your holy child Yahushua, whom you have anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the nations and the people of Yerushalayim, have gathered together, for the purpose of doing whatever your hand and your counsel determined before it was done. And now, Yehovah, behold their threats, and grant to your servants, so that they may speak your word with boldness, by stretching out your hand to heal, and that signs and wonders may be done by the name of your holy child Yahushua. And when they had prayed, the place was shaken where they were assembled together, and they were all filled with the Ruach Kodesh, and they spoke the word of Elohim with boldness. Chapter 5. And the multitude of those who believed were of one heart and of one mind, nor did any of them say what was possessed by himself, but they shared all things. And with great power the apostles gave witness of the resurrection of the abundance of Yahushua, and great grace was upon them all, nor was there any among them who lacked. For as many as were possessors of land or houses sold them, and brought the profits of the things that were sold, and laid them down at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to every man according to his need. And Yusuf, who was surnamed Barnabas by the apostles, which is interpreted as son of consolation, a Lehi of the country of Cyprus, having land, sold it, and brought the money, and laid it at the apostles' feet. But a certain man named Ananias, with Sapphira, his wife, sold a possession, and kept back part of the price. Also his wife was privy to it, and brought a certain part, and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Kepa said, Ananias, why has Hashatan filled your heart to lie to the Ruach Kodesh, and to keep back part of the price from the land? While it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not in your own power? Why have you conceived this thing in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to Elohim. Therefore, hearing these words, Ananias fell down and gave up the ghost. And great fear came upon all those who heard these things. And the young men arose, wrapped him up, and carried him out and buried him. And about 3 hours later, when his wife came in, not knowing what had happened, then Kepa responded to her, Tell me whether you sold the land for so much. And she said, Yes, for so much. Then Kepa said to her, How is it that you have agreed together to tempt the Ruach of Yehovah? Behold, the feet of them who have buried your husband are at the door, and will carry you out. Then she immediately fell down at his feet, and yielded up the ghost. And the men came in, and found her dead, and carried her out, burying her with her husband. And great fear came upon all the assembly, and upon as many as heard these things. Furthermore, by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders worked among the people, and they were all with one accord in Shelomah's porch. And of the rest no man dared join himself to them, but the people magnified them. And more believers were added to Adonai, multitudes both of men and women, insomuch that they brought the sick out of the streets, and laid them on beds and couches, so that at least the shadow of Kepha, passing by, might overshadow some of them. Also a multitude came from the cities around Jerusalem, and those who were vexed with unclean spirits, and they healed everyone. Then the high priest rose up, and all those who were with him, which is the sect of the Zaddukim, and were filled with indignation, and laid their hands upon the apostles, and put them in the common prison. But the angel of Yahweh came by night, opened the prison doors, and brought them out, and said, Go stand and speak in the temple to the people all the words of this life. And when they heard that, they entered into the temple early in the morning, and taught. But the high priest came, and those who were with him, and called the council together, and all the senate of the children of Yeshariel, and sent to the prison to have them brought. But when the officers came, and did not find them in the prison, they returned and told, saying, Truly we found the prison securely shut, and the keepers standing outside before the door. But when we opened it, we did not find anyone inside. Now when the high priest and the captain of the temple and the chief priests heard these things, they doubted how this happened to them. Then someone came and told them, saying, Behold, the men whom you put in prison are standing in the temple, and teaching the people. Therefore the captain went with the officers, and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, or else they would have been stoned. And when they brought them, they set them before the council. And the high priest asked them, saying, Did we not straitly command you, that you will not teach in this name? And behold, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Kepha and the apostles answered and said, We should obey Elohim instead of men. The Elohim of our fathers raised up Yahushua, whom you slew and hanged on a tree. Elohim has exalted him with his right hand to be a prince and a savior, for to give repentance to Yeshariel and forgiveness of sins. And we are his witnesses of these things. Also the Ruach Kodesh, whom Elohim has given to those who obey him. When they heard that, they were injured, and took counsel to slay them. Then one stood up in the council, a Perushim named Gamliel, a doctor of the law, who had a reputation among all the people, and commanded to put the apostles out for a short time. And he said, You men of Yeshariel, take heed to yourselves what you intend to do by touching these men. For before these days, Theodas rose up, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, who was slain, and all, as many as obeyed him, were scattered and brought to nothing. After this, Yehuda of Galilee rose up during the days of the taxing, and drew away many people after him. So too he perished, and all, as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. And now I say to you, refrain from these men, and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to nothing. But if it is of Elohim, you cannot overthrow it, or else you will be found fighting against Elohim also. Therefore they agreed with him. Then, when they had called and beat the apostles, they commanded that they should not speak in the name of Yahushua, and let them go. And they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. Furthermore, they did not stop teaching and preaching Yahushua HaMashiach in the temple and in every house. Chapter 6. And in those days, when the number of the Talmudim was multiplied, there arose murmurs from the Hellenists among the Ayibrim, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. Then the 12 called the multitude of the Talmudim to them and said, "It is not right that we leave the word of Elohim and serve tables. Therefore choose 7 brethren, men with honest report, full of the Ruach Kodesh and wisdom, from amongst yourselves, whom we may appoint over this business. But we will give ourselves continually to prayer and to the ministry of the word." And the saying pleased the whole multitude. And they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Ruach Kodesh, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch, whom they set before the apostles. And when they had prayed, they laid their hands upon them. And the word of Elohim increased, and the number of the Talmudim multiplied in Yerushalayim greatly. And a great company of the priests were obedient to the faith. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then some of the synagogue, who are called the Libertines, and Cyrenians, and Alexandrians, and of those from Cilicia and Asia, arose, disputing with Stephen. However, they were not able to resist the wisdom of the Ruach by which he spoke. Then they prompted men who said, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim." Therefore they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, and came and caught him and brought him to the council, and set up false witnesses who said, "This man will not stop speaking blasphemous words against this holy place and the teaching. For we have heard them say that this Yehoshua the Nazarite will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moshe delivered to us." And all who sat in the council looked upon him, seeing his face as if it were the face of an angel. Chapter 7. Then the priest said, "Are these things true?" And he said, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The Elohim of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. And he said to him, 'Get yourself out of your country and from your kindred, and come into the land that I will show you.' Then he came out from the land of the Kashdim and dwelt in Haran. And from there, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land in which you now dwell. And he gave him no inheritance in it, nothing, not even to place his foot. However, he promised that he would give it for a possession to him and to his seed after him, when he still had no child. Then Elohim spoke on this wise, that his seed will sojourn in a strange land, and that they will bring them into bondage and be mistreated for 400 years. Then Elohim said, 'I will judge the nation to whom will be in bondage, and after that they will come out and serve me in this place.' Moreover, he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begot Yitzhak, and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Yitzhak begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs. Then, moved with envy, the patriarchs sold Yosef into Mitzrayim, But Elohim was with him, and delivered him out of his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Paro, king of Mitzrayim. And he made him governor over Mitzrayim and his entire house. Now scarcity and great affliction came over all the land of Mitzrayim and Canaan, and our fathers found no sustenance. But when Yaakov heard that there was grain in Mitzrayim, he sent out our fathers the first time. Then, during the second time, Yusuf was made known to his brethren, and Yusuf's kindred was made known to Paro. Then Yusuf sent and called his father Yaakov to him, and all his kindred, 75 souls. Furthermore, Yaakov went down into Mitzrayim, and died, he and our fathers. Then he was carried over into Shechem, and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham bought for a sum of money of the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But when the time of the promise drew near, which Elohim had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Mitzrayim, until another king arose, who did not know Yusuf. The same dealt wickedly with our kindred, and mistreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children, for the purpose that they might not live, in which time Musha was born, and was very fair, and nourished in his father's house for 3 months. Then, when he was cast out, the daughter of Paro took him up, and nourished him as her own son. And Musha was educated with all the wisdom of the Mitzrayim, and was mighty in words and in deeds. And when he completed 40 years, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Yeshariel. Then, seeing someone suffer wrongfully, he defended him, and avenged him whom was oppressed, and struck the Mitzri. For he oppressed his brother. For he assumed that his brethren would understand that by the hand of Elohim he would deliver them. But they did not understand. And the next day he showed himself to those who fought, and encouraged them to be peaceful, saying, Sirs, are you brethren? Why do you do wrong one to another? But he who wronged his neighbor, pushing him away, said, Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Will you kill me like you did the Mitzri yesterday? Then Musha fled at this saying, and was a stranger in the land of Midian. There he begot 2 sons. And when 40 years were expired, an angel of Yahweh appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, in the flame of a burning bush. When Musha saw it, he wondered at the sight, and as he drew near to behold it, the voice of Yahweh came to him. I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. Then Musha trembled, and dared not look. Then Yahweh said to him, Take off your shoes from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I have seen the affliction of my people, which is in Mitzrayim. I have heard their groaning, and am coming down to deliver them. And now, come, I will send you into Mitzrayim. This Musha, whom they refused, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge? The same one Elohim sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out, having showed wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim, and in the Sea of Reeds, and in the wilderness for 40 years. This is that Musha, who said to the children of Yeshariel, Yahweh, your Elohim, will raise up a prophet for you, of your brethren, similar to me. Him you will hearken. This is him who was in the assembly in the wilderness, with the angel that spoke to him, and our fathers in Mount Sinai, who received the living word to give to us, to whom our fathers would not obey, but thrusted him from them. and in their hearts turned back again into Mizraim, saying to Aharon, "Make us deities to walk before us. As for this Musha, who has brought us out from the land of Mizraim, we do not know what has become of him." Therefore they made a calf in those days, and offered sacrifice to the idol, and rejoiced in the work of their own hands. Then Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of the heavens, like it is written in the Sefer of the prophets, "O you house of Yeshariel, have you offered slain beasts and sacrifices for 40 years in the wilderness to me? Also you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of the deity Rampham, figures that you made to worship. Therefore I will carry you away beyond Babel." Our fathers had the tabernacle of witness in the wilderness, as he had appointed, speaking to Moshe, so that he would make it according to the fashion that he had seen, also which our fathers who came later with Yehoshua brought into the possession of the nations, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of David, who found favor before Elohim, and desired to build a tabernacle for the Elohim of Jacob. However, the Most High does not dwell in temples made by hands. Like the prophet said, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What house can you build for me, saith Yahweh? What is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all things? And uncircumcised in heart, you always resist the Ruach Kodesh, like your fathers, so too you. Which of the prophets have your fathers not persecuted? And they killed those who previously revealed the coming of the righteous one, of whom you are now the betrayers and murderers. Who has received the teaching of the disposition of angels, but have not kept it? When they heard these things, they were cut in the heart, and they gnashed upon him with teeth. But he, being full of the Ruach Kodesh, looked up earnestly into the heavens, and saw the glory of Elohim and Yehoshua standing on the right hand of Elohim, and said, "Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of Elohim." Then they cried out with a loud voice, and stopped their ears, and ran upon him in one accord, and cast him out of the city, and stoned him. Also the witnesses laid their clothes down at the feet of a young man, whose name was Shaul. Therefore they stoned Stephen, who called and said, "Adonai Yehoshua, receive my spirit." And he knelt down and cried with a loud voice, "Adonai, do not lay this sin to their charge." And when he had said this, he fell asleep. Chapter 8. And Shaul consented to his death, and at that time there was a great persecution against the assembly who were at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Yehuda and Shamarun, except the apostles. The devout men carried Stephen and made great lamentation over him. As for Shaul, he made havoc of the assembly, entering into every house, and hauling men and women committed to prison. However, those who were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. Then Philip went down to the city of Shamarun, and preached Mashiach to them. And the people listened to the things that Philip spoke with one accord. Moreover, hearing and seeing the miracles that he did, the people gave heed to those things that Philip spoke with one accord. For unclean spirits, crying with a loud voice, came out of many who were possessed with them, and many taken with palsies, and the lame were healed. And there was great joy in that city. But there was a certain man, called Shimeon, who used sorcery previously in the same city, and bewitched the people of Shamarun, boasting that he was something great, to whom they all gave heed, from the least to the greatest, saying, This man has the great power of Elohim. And they had great respect for him, because he had bewitched them with sorceries for a long time. But when they believed Philippe preaching the things concerning the kingdom of Elohim, the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, they were baptized, both men and women. Then Shimeon himself believed also, and when he was baptized, he continued with Philippe, and wondered, beholding the miracles and signs that were done. Now when the apostles who were at Jerusalem heard that Shimeon had received the word of Elohim, they sent Kepha and Yochanan to them, who, when they came, prayed for them, so that they might receive the Ruach Kodesh. For as yet she had not fallen upon any of them. They were only baptized in the name of Adonai, Yahushua. Then they laid their hands upon them, and they received the Ruach Kodesh. And when Shimeon saw that the Ruach Kodesh was given by the apostles laying their hands, he offered them money, saying, "Give me this power too, so that on whomever I lay hands, he may receive the Ruach Kodesh." But Kepha said to him, "Your money will perish with you, because you have thought that the gift of Elohim can be purchased with money. You do not have a part nor lot in this matter, for your heart is not right in the sight of Elohim. Therefore repent of this, your wickedness, and pray Elohim if the thought of your heart may be forgiven. For I perceive that you are in the gall of bitterness and the bondage of iniquity." Then Shimeon answered and said, "Pray to Adonai for me, that none of these things which you have spoken come upon me." And they, when they had testified and preached the word of Adonai, returned to Jerusalem, and preached the gospel in many villages of Shimeon. And the angel of Yahuwah spoke to Philippe, saying, "Arise and go toward the south, to the way that goes down from Jerusalem to Azza, which is the desert." Therefore he arose and went, and beheld a man of Cush, an eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Cushim, who had the charge of all her treasure, and had come to Jerusalem to worship, was returning and sitting in his chariot, reading Jeshojehu, the prophet. Therefore Philippe ran there and heard him read the prophet of Jeshojehu, and asked, "Do you understand what you are reading?" And he answered, "How can I, unless some man guides me?" And he desired that Philippe would come up and sit with him. The place of the scriptures which he read was this: "He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and like a mute lamb before his shearer, so too he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation his judgment was taken away, and who will declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth." Then the eunuch questioned Philippe and asked, "I pray you, of whom does this prophet speak? Of himself, or of some other man?" Then Philippe opened his mouth, and began at the same scripture, and preached Yahushua to him. And as they went on their way, they came to a certain water. And the eunuch said, "Behold, water, what is stopping me from being baptized?" And Philippe said, "If you believe in all your heart, you may." And he answered and said, "I believe that Yahushua HaMashiach is the Son of Elohim." Then he commanded the chariot to stand still, and they both stepped down into the water, both Philippe and the eunuch, and he baptized him. And when they came up out of the water, the Ruach of Yahuwah caught Philippe away, such that the eunuch saw him no more, and he went on his way rejoicing. Furthermore, Philippe was found at Azotus, and passing through, he preached in all the cities until he came to Cilicia. And Shaul, still spewing out threats and slaughter against the Talmudim of Adonai, went to the high priest. And from him he desired letters for the synagogues of Damascus, so that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly light from the heavens shined around him. And he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying to him, Shaul, why do you persecute me? Therefore he asked, Who are you, Adonai? And Adonai said, I am Yahushua, whom you persecute. Is it hard for you to kick against the pricks? Then he trembled and was astonished, saying, Adonai, what will you have me to do? So Adonai said to him, Arise and go into the city, and it will be told to you what you will do. And the men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. Then Shaul arose from the earth, and when his eyes were opened, he saw no man. However, they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was without sight for 3 days, and neither ate nor drank. There was a certain Talmudi at Damascus, named Ananias. And Adonai said to him in a vision, Ananias. And he answered, Behold, here I am, Adonai. Then Adonai said to him, Arise and go to the street that is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Yehuda for someone called Shaul of Tarsus. For behold, he prays. And he has seen a vision of a man named Ananias coming in, and putting his hand upon him, so that he might receive his sight. Then Ananias answered Adonai, I have heard of this man by many, how much evil he has done to your saints at Jerusalem. Also, he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who call upon your name here. But Adonai said to him, Go your way, for he is my chosen vessel, to carry my name before the nations, the kings, and the children of Yisrael. For I will show him the great things he must suffer for my name's sake. Then Ananias went his way, and entered into the house, and putting his hands on him, said, Brother Shaul, Adonai, Yahushua, who appeared to you along the way as you came, has sent me, so that you might receive your sight, and be filled with the Ruach Kodesh. Then immediately something like scales fell from his eyes. Also he received sight, and arose, and was baptized. And when he had received grain, he was strengthened. Then Shaul was with the Talmudim who were in Damascus for a few days. And he immediately preached Mashiach in the synagogues, that he is the Son of Elohim. Furthermore, all who heard were amazed, and said, Is this not he who destroyed those who called upon this name in Jerusalem, and came here for the purpose to bring them bound to the chief priests? However, Shaul increased more in strength, and confounded the Yehudim who dwelt at Damascus, proving that this is the Mashiach. And after many days were fulfilled, the Yehudim took counsel to kill him. But their ambush of Shaul was known, and they watched the gates day and night to kill him. Then the Talmudim took him by night, and let him down the wall in a basket. And when Shaul had come to Jerusalem, he tried to join himself to the Talmudim. But they were all afraid of him, and did not believe that he was a Talmudi. But Barnabas took him, and brought him to the apostles, and declared to him how he had seen Adonai in the way, and that he had spoken to him, and how he had preached boldly at Damascus in the name of Yahushua. Therefore he was with them coming in and going out at Jerusalem, and he spoke boldly in the name of Adonai, Yahushua, and disputed against the Hellenists. But they went around to slay him. When the brethren knew, they brought him down to Caesarea, and sent him out to Tarsus. Then the assemblies rested throughout all Yehuda and Galilee, and Shamarun, and were edified, also walking in the reverence of Adonai and in the comfort of the BeRuack Kodesh they multiplied. And it came to pass, as 𝐤𝐄𝐄 passed through all quarters, he came down to the saints who dwelt in Lydda also. And he found a certain man named Aeneas, who had kept his bed for 8 years, and was sick of palsy. And 𝐤𝐄𝐄 said to him, Aeneas, Jeshojehu HaMashiach will make you whole. Arise and make your bed. Then he arose immediately, and all who dwelt at Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to Adonai. Now there was a certain Talmudi named Tabitha at Joppa, which by interpretation is called Gazelle. This woman was full of good works and alms, the deeds which she did, and it came to pass in those days that she was sick and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in an upper room, because Lydda was near to Joppa, and the Talmudim had heard that 𝐤𝐄𝐄 was there, desiring that he would not delay to come to them. Therefore 𝐤𝐄𝐄 arose and went with them. When he had come, they brought him into the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him weeping, and showing the coats and garments that Gazelle made while she was with them. However, 𝐤𝐄𝐄 put them all out, and knelt down, and prayed, and turning to the body, said, Tabitha, arise. Then she opened her eyes, and when she saw 𝐤𝐄𝐄, she sat up. And he gave her his hand, and lifted her up, and when he had called the saints and widows, presented her alive. And it was known throughout all Joppa, and many believed in Adonai. And it came to pass that he tarried many days in Joppa with Shimeon, a tanner. Chapter 10. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian, a devout man, and one who feared Elohim with all his house, who gave many alms to the people, and prayed to Elohim always. Around the 9th hour of the day, he saw in a vision an angel of Elohim coming to him, and saying to him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid, and said, What is it, Adonai? And he said to him, Your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before Elohim. And now send to Joppa, and call for Shimeon, whose surname is 𝐤𝐄𝐄. He lodges with someone, Shimeon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He will tell you what you ought to do. And when the angel who spoke to Cornelius had departed, he called 2 of his household servants, and a devout soldier of those who waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things to them, he sent them to Joppa. On the next day, as they went on their journey, they drew near to the city. 𝐤𝐄𝐄 went up upon the housetops to pray around the 6th hour. And he was very hungry, and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance, and saw the heavens opened, and a certain vessel descending to him, as if it had been a great sheet, knit at the 4 corners, and let down to the earth, in which were all manner of 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. Then a voice came to him, Arise, 𝐤𝐄𝐄, kill and eat. But 𝐤𝐄𝐄 said, Not so, Adonai, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spoke to him again, the 2nd time, What Elohim has cleansed, you will not call it unclean. This was done 3 times. Then the vessel was received up again into the heavens. Now while 𝐤𝐄𝐄 doubted in himself what the vision that he had seen meant, behold, the men who were sent from Cornelius had made an inquiry of Shimeon's house, and stood before the gate. Therefore they called and asked whether Shimeon, who was surnamed 𝐤𝐄𝐄, lodged there. While 𝐤𝐄𝐄 thought on the vision, the BeRuack said to him, Behold, 3 men seek you. Therefore get yourself down and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then 𝐤𝐄A went down to the men who were sent to him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am him whom you seek. What is the reason that you have come? And they answered, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and someone who reveres Elohim, and of good report among the entire nation of the Yehudim, was warned by a holy angel from Elohim to send for you into his house, and to hear words from you. Then he called them in and lodged. And on the next day 𝐤𝐄A went away with them. Also some brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the next day, after they entered into Caesarea, then Cornelius waited for them, and had called his kinsmen and close friends together. And as 𝐤𝐄A was coming in, Cornelius met him, and fell down at his feet, and worshipped him. But 𝐤𝐄A took him up, saying, Stand up, I am a man also. And as he walked with him, he went in, and found many who had come together. And he said to him, You know that this is an unlawful thing for a man who is a Yehudi to keep company, or come to someone of another nation. But Elohim has showed me that I will not call any man common or unclean. Therefore I came without objection, as soon as I was sent for. However, I ask, What is your intention for sending me? And Cornelius answered, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour, and at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothes, and said, Cornelius, your prayer is heard, and your alms are remembered in the sight of Elohim. Therefore send to Joppa, and there call upon Shimeon, whose surname is 𝐤𝐄A. He is lodging by the seaside in the house of Shimeon, a tanner, who when he comes will speak to you. Therefore I immediately sent for you, and you have done well that you have come. Now we are all present here before Elohim, to hear all things that are commanded to you of Elohim. Then 𝐤𝐄A opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that Elohim is no respecter of people, but in every nation that fears him and works righteousness, he will accept him. The word which is sent to the children of Yisrael, preaching peace by Yahushua HaMashiach, he is Adonai of all. That word you know, which was published throughout all Yehuda, and began from Galilee, after the baptism which Yochanan preached, how Elohim anointed Yahushua the Nazarite with the Ruach Kodesh and with power, who went around doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for Elohim was with him. And we are witnesses of all things that he did in the land of the Yehudim and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. On the 3rd day, Elohim raised him up and showed him openly, not to all the people, but to us, to witnesses who were previously chosen by Elohim, who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. And he commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that it is he who is ordained by Elohim to be the judge of the living and dead. All the prophets give witness to him that through his name whoever believes in him will receive forgiveness of sins. While 𝐤𝐄A still spoke these words, the Ruach Kodesh fell upon all of them who heard the word. And those of the circumcision who believed were astonished, as many as came with 𝐤𝐄A, because the gifts of the Ruach Kodesh was poured out upon the nations. For they heard them speak with tongues, and magnify Elohim. Then 𝐤𝐄A responded, Can any man forbid water, that these should not be baptized, who have received the Ruach Kodesh as well as us? And he commanded them to be baptized in the name of Adonai. Then they requested for him to tarry a few days. Chapter 11. And the apostles and brethren who were in Yehuda heard that the nations had also received the word of Elohim. And when 𝐉𝐄 had come up to Yerushalayim, those who were of the circumcision contended with him, saying, You went in to uncircumcised men and ate with them. But 𝐉𝐄 rehearsed it from the beginning and explained it in order for them, saying, I was in the city of Yappu praying, and I saw a vision during a trance. A certain vessel, like a great sheet, descended from the heavens by 4 corners, and it even came to me, upon which, when I fastened my eyes, I considered and saw 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And I heard a voice saying to me, Arise, 𝐉𝐄, slay and eat. But I said, Not so, Adonai, for nothing common or unclean has entered into my mouth at any time. But the voice answered me again from the heavens, What Elohim has cleansed, you will not call unclean. And this was done 3 times. Then all were drawn up again into the heavens. And behold, immediately there were 3 men already come to the house where I was, sent from Caesarea to me. And the BeRuack told me to go with them, without doubting. Moreover, these 6 brethren accompanied me, and we entered into the man's house. And he showed us how he had seen an angel in his house, who stood and said to him, Send men to Yappu, and call for Shimaun, whose surname is 𝐉𝐄, who will tell you words by which you and your entire house will be saved. And as I began to speak, the Ruach Kodesh fell upon them, like on us at the beginning. Then I remembered the word of Adonai, how he said, Truly Yochanan baptized with water, but you shall be baptized in the Ruach Kodesh. Then Elohim gave them the gift like us, to those who believed on Adonai, Yahushua HaMashiach. Who am I, that I should withstand Elohim? When they heard these things, they held their peace, and glorified Elohim, saying, Then Elohim has granted to the nations repentance to life also. Now those who were scattered abroad because of the persecution that arose concerning Stephen traveled as far as Venice and Cyprus and Antioch, preaching the word to no one but to the Yehudim only. And some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which, when they had come to Antioch, spoke to the Hellenists, preaching Adonai Yahushua. And the hand of Adonai was with them, and a great number believed and turned to Adonai. Then tidings of these things came to the ears of the assembly that was in Yerushalayim, and they sent out Barnabas so that he would go as far as Antioch, who, when he came and had seen the grace of Elohim, was glad, and encouraged them all with the intention of heart that they would cleave to Adonai. For he was a good man, and full of the Ruach Kodesh, and of faith, and many people were added to Adonai. Then Barnabas departed to Tarsus to find Shaul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. And it came to pass that they assembled themselves with the assembly for a whole year, and taught many people. And the Talmudim were called Christians in Antioch first. Furthermore, during these days, prophets came from Yerushalayim to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and signified by the Ruach that there was a great scarcity throughout all the world, which came to pass during the days of Claudius Caesar. Then the Talmudim, every man according to his ability, determined to send relief to the brethren who dwelt in Yehuda, which they did. Also they sent it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Shaul. Chapter 12. Now about that time Herod the king stretched out his hand to vex some of the assembly. And he killed Jacob, the brother of Yochanan, with the sword. And because he saw that it pleased the Yehudim, He proceeded further to take 𝐉𝐄 also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him out to the people after Pesach. Therefore 𝐉𝐄 was kept in prison. However, unstopping prayer was made outside of the assembly to Elohim for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth, that same night 𝐉𝐄 was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, an angel of Adonai came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he struck 𝐉𝐄 on the side, and raised him up, saying, Arise quickly. Then his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said to him, Gird yourself, and bind on your sandals. And so he did. Then he said to him, Cast your garment around you, and follow me. Then he went out and followed him, and he did not know that it was real, but was done by the angel, but thought it was a vision. When they were past the first and second ward, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord, and they went out, and passed on through a street, and from there the angel departed from him. And when 𝐉𝐄 had come to himself, he said, Now I know of a certainty that Adonai has sent his angel, and has delivered me out of the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the people of Yehudah. And when they had considered it, they came to the house of Mary, the mother of Yochanan, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together, praying. And as 𝐉𝐄 knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel named Rhoda came to hearken. And when she recognized 𝐉𝐄's voice, she did not open the gate, but ran with gladness, and told how 𝐉𝐄 stood in front of the gate. You are crazy. But she insisted that it was true. Then they said, It is his angel. However, 𝐉𝐄 continued knocking, and when they opened and saw him, they were astonished. But he gestured with his hand for them to hold their peace, declaring to them how Adonai had brought him out of the prison. Go show these things to Jacob and to the brethren. Then he departed and went into another place. Now as soon as it was day, it was not a small stirring among the soldiers, what had become of 𝐉𝐄. And when Herod sought for him, but did not find him, he examined the keepers, and commanded that they be put to death. And he went down from Yehudah to Caesarea, and Herod was very displeased with those from Tzur and Sidon. But they came with one accord to him, desiring peace, after making Blastus, the king's chamberlain, their friend, because their country was nourished by the king. And upon that day Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat upon his throne, and made a speech for them. Then the people gave a shout, saying, The voice of an Elohim, and not a man. And immediately the angel of Adonai struck him, because he did not give Elohim the glory. And he was eaten by worms, and gave up the ghost. But the word of Elohim grew and multiplied. Furthermore, Barnabas and Shaul returned to Jerusalem when they fulfilled their ministry, and took Yochanan, whose surname was Mark, with them. Chapter 13. Now in the assembly that was at Antioch, there were some prophets and teachers who were brought up with Herod the tetrarch, Barnabas and Shimeon, who was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, and Shaul. As they ministered to Adonai and fasted, the Ruach Kodesh said, Separate Barnabas and Shaul for me, for the work that I have called them. And when they had fasted and prayed, and laid hands on them, they sent them away, being sent forth by the Ruach Kodesh, departed to Cilicia, and from there they sailed to Cyprus. And when they were at Salamis, they preached the word of Elohim in the synagogues of the Yehudim. Also they had Yochanan for a minister. And when they had gone through the Isle of Pathos, they found a certain sorcerer, a false prophet, a Yehudi, whose name was Bar Yehoshua, who was with the deputy of the country, Sergius Paulus, a prudent man who called for Barnabas and Shaul, and desired to hear the word of Elohim. But Elymas the sorcerer, for so is his name by interpretation, withstood them, seeking to turn away the deputy from the faith. Then Shaul, who is also Paul, set his eyes upon him, filled with Ruach Kodesh, and said, O you child of the devil, full of every guile and every deceit, enemy of all righteousness, you shall not stop perverting the ways of Adonai. And now, behold, the hand of Adonai is upon you, and you shall be blind, not seeing the sun for a season. And immediately a mist of the darkness fell on him, and he went about seeking someone to lead him by the hand. Then the deputy, when he saw what had happened, believed, being astonished at the doctrine of Adonai. Now when Paul and his company were loosened from Paphos, they came to Perga in Pamphylia, and Yochanan departed from them, returned to Jerusalem. But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue on the day of Shabbat, and sat down. And after the reading of the Torah and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent to them, saying, Men, brethren, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, say on. Then Paul stood up, and beckoning with a hand, said, Men of Yisrael, and you who revere Elohim, give audience. The Elohim of this people of Yisrael chose our fathers, and exalted the people when they dwelt as strangers in the land of Mitzrayim, and with a high arm he brought them out of it. And about the time of 40 years he suffered their manner in the wilderness. And when he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he divided their land by lot for them. And after that he gave judges for about the span of 450 years, until Shemuel the prophet. And afterward they desired a king. And Elohim gave to them Shaul, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, by the span of 40 years. And when he removed him, he raised up David to be a king for them, to whom also he gave a testimony, and said, I have found David, the son of Yesse, a man after my own heart, who will fulfill my will. Of this man's seed Elohim did according to his promise to Yisrael, raising up a Savior, Yahushua. Then Yochanan had first preached the baptism of repentance to all the people of Yisrael before his coming. And as Yochanan fulfilled his course, he said, Whom do you think that I am? I am no one. But behold, there comes one after me, whose shoes of his feet I am not worthy to loosen. Men and brethren, children of the stock of Abraham, and whoever among you fears Elohim, to you the word of this salvation is sent, for those who dwell at Jerusalem and their rulers, because they do not know him, or the voices of the prophets who are read every day of Shabbat. By condemning him, they have fulfilled them. And although they found no cause of death in him, still they desired Pilate that he would be slain. And when they had fulfilled all that was written of him, they took him down from the tree and laid him in a sepulchre. But Elohim raised him from the dead. And he was seen for many days by those who came up with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are his witnesses to the people. And he declared glad tidings to you, how that the promise which was made to our fathers, Elohim has fulfilled the same for us, their children, in that he raised up Yahushua again. Also, like it is written in the 2nd Psalm, You are my son. This day I have begotten you. And concerning that he raised him up from the dead, no more to return to corruption, he said on this wise, I will give you the sure mercies of David. Also, this is why he says in another psalm, You shall not suffer your Holy One to see corruption. For David, after he had served his own generation by the will of Elohim, fell on sleep, and was laid to his fathers, and saw corruption. But he, whom Elohim raised again, saw no corruption. Therefore be it known to you, men and brethren, that through this man forgiveness of sin is preached to you, and by him all who believe are justified from all things, from which you could not be justified by the teaching of Moshe. Therefore beware, or else it will come upon you what was spoken of by the prophets. Behold, you despisers, and wonder, and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you shall in no wise believe, even though a man declares it to you. And when the Yehudim went out of the synagogue, the nations desired that these words might be preached to them the next Shabbat. Now when the congregation was broken up, many of the Yehudim and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of Elohim. And the next day of Shabbat, almost the whole city came together to hear the word of Elohim. But when the Yehudim saw the multitudes, they were filled with envy, and spoke against those things which were spoken by Paul, contradicting and blaspheming. Then Paul and Barnabas became bold and said, It was necessary that the word of Elohim was first spoken to you. But seeing that you put it from you, then judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life. Behold, we turn to the nations. For so has Adonai commanded us, saying, I have set you to be a light of the nations, so that you will be for salvation to the ends of the earth. And when the nations heard this, they were glad, and glorified the word of Adonai. And as many as were ordained to eternal life believed. And the word of Adonai was published throughout all the region. But the Yehudim stirred up the devout and honorable women, and the headmen of the city, and raised persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and expelled them out of their borders. But they shook off the dust of their feet against them, and came to Iconium. And the Talmudim were filled with joy, and with the Ruach Kodesh. Chapter 14. And it came to pass in Iconium that they both went together into the synagogue of the Yehudim, and they spoke, so that a great multitude both of the Yehudim and Hellenists also believed. But the unbelieving Yehudim stirred up the nations, and made their minds with evil effects against the brethren. Therefore they abode there for a long time, speaking boldly for Adonai, who gave a testimony of his message of grace, also granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands. But the population of the city was divided, and part held with the Yehudim, and part with the apostles. Since then there was an intensity made by both the nations and Yehudim, also with their rulers, to mistreat and stone them. They were aware of it, and fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and to the region that lies around. And there they preached the gospel. And a certain man sat at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. And the same heard Paul speak, who earnestly watched him, and perceived that he had faith to be healed. And he said with a loud voice, Stand up on your feet. And he leaped and walked. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, The deities have come down to us like the likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter, and Paul Mercury, because he was the chief speaker. Then the priest of Jupiter, who was before their city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people. When the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard of it, they tore their clothes and ran in among the people, crying out and saying, "Sirs, why do you do these things? Also, we too are mortal men like you, and preach to you that we should turn from these vanities to the living Elohim, who made the heavens and earth and the sea and all things that are in it, who, in times past, allowed all nations to walk in their own ways. However, he did not leave himself without a witness, in that he did good and gave us rain from the heavens and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness." And with these sayings, they barely restrained the people, so that they did not do a sacrifice for them. The Yehudim came from Antioch and Iconium, who persuaded the people and stoned Paul. Supposing he was dead, they drew him out of the city. However, as the Talmudim stood around him, he rose up and came into the city, and the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe. And when they had preached the gospel to that city, and had taught many, they returned again to Lystra, and Iconium, and Antioch, confirming the lives of the Talmudim, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and that we must enter into the kingdom of Elohim through great tribulation. And when they had ordained them elders in every assembly, and had prayed with fasting, they commended them to Adonai, on whom they believed. And after they had passed through Pisidia, they came to Pamphylia. And when they had preached the word in Perga, they went down to Attalia. And from there they sailed to Antioch, from where they were committed to the grace of Elohim for the work which they fulfilled. And when they came and gathered the assembly together, they rehearsed all that Elohim had done for them, and how he had opened the door of faith to the nations. And there they abode a long time with the Talmudim. Chapter 15. And some men who came down from Yehuda taught the brethren, "Unless you are circumcised according to the manner of Moshe, you cannot be saved," inciting sedition and debates that were not small by Paul and Barnabas with him. They decided that Paul and Barnabas, and some others of them, would go up to Jerusalem to the apostles and elders concerning this question. And being brought on their way by the assembly, they passed through Phoenice and Shamerun, declaring the conversation of the nations, and they caused great joy to all the brethren. And when they came to Jerusalem, they were received by the assembly, and the apostles, and elders. Then they declared all things that Elohim had done with them. But some of the sect of the Perushim, who believed, rose up, saying, "It is necessary to circumcise them, and to command to keep the teaching of Moshe." And the apostles and elders came together to consider this matter. And when there was a lot of arguing, Kepha arose and said to them, "Men, brethren, you know how that a good while ago Elohim made a choice among us, that by my mouth the nations will hear the word of the gospel and believe. And Elohim, who knows the hearts, bear them witness, giving them the Ruach Kodesh, even like to us. But put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Now therefore, why do we tempt Elohim to put a yoke upon the neck of the Talmudim, which neither our fathers nor we were able to carry? But we believe through faith the grace of Adonai, Yahushua HaMashiach, we will be saved even as they." Then the entire multitude kept silent and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring the miracles and wonders Elohim had worked among the nations by them. And after they had held their peace, Jacob answered, saying, "Men, brethren, hearken to me. Shemaun has declared how Elohim visited the nations at first, to take a people for his name out of them. And the words of the prophets agree with this, as it is written, After this I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down, and I will build again its ruins, and I will set it up, so that the remnant of men might seek after Adonai, and all the nations, upon whom my name is called, saith Adonai, who does all these things, saith 𝤉𤄄𝐄, who does all these things. All his works have been known to Elohim since the beginning of the world. This is why my declaration is that we do not trouble them, those who have turned to Elohim from among the nations, but that we write to them so that they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from strangled things, and from blood. For since ancient times, Moshe has been in every city that preached him, being read in the synagogues every day of Shabat. Then it pleased the apostles and elders with the whole assembly to send chosen men of their own company to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas, Judas, surnamed Barsabas, and Silas, head men among the brethren, and by them they wrote according to this manner. The apostles and elders and brethren, greetings to the brethren who are at the nations in Antioch and Aram and Cilicia. For as much as we have heard that some of us went out troubling you with words, subverting your souls, saying, Be circumcised and keep the Torah, to whom we gave no commandment. It seems good to us, being assembled with one accord, to send chosen men to you, with our beloved Barnabas and Paul, men who have endangered their lives for the name of our Adonai, Yahushua HaMashiach. Therefore we have sent Yehuda and Silas, who will tell you the same things by mouth also. For it seemed good to the Ruach Kodesh and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things, that you abstain from meats offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, of which if you keep yourselves, you will do well. Fare you well. For when they were dismissed, they came to Antioch, and when they had gathered the multitude together, they delivered the letter. When they had read, they rejoiced for the consolation. Then Yehuda and Silas, being prophets also themselves, encouraged the brethren with many words, and confirmed them. And after they had tarried a time, they were let go from the brethren to the apostles in peace. However, it pleased Silas to abide there still. But Paul and Barnabas continued in Antioch, teaching and preaching the word of Adonai, with many others also. And some days after, Paul said to Barnabas, Let us go again and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of Adonai, and see how they are. And Barnabas decided to take with them Yochanan, whose surname was Mark. But Paul did not think it was good to take him with them, who departed from them from Pamphylia, and did not go with them to the work. And the contention was so sharp between them that they departed, separated one from another. And so Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. And Paul chose Silas and departed, being recommended by the brethren to the grace of Elohim. And he went through Aram and Cilicia, confirming the assemblies. Chapter 16. Then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain Talmudi was there, named Timothy, the son of a certain woman, which was a believing Yehudi woman, but his father was a Hellenist, who was well reported by the brethren that were at Lystra and Iconium. This one wanted Paul to go with him, so he took and circumcised him because of the Yehudim who were in those quarters, for they all knew that his father was a Hellenist. And they went through the cities. They delivered them the decrees to keep, that were ordained by the apostles and elders who were at Jerusalem. And so the assemblies were established in the faith, and increased in number daily. Now when they had gone through Phrygia and the region of Galatia, and they were forbidden by the Ruach Kodesh to preach the word in Asia. After they had come to Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Ruach did not allow them, and they passed by Bithynia, coming down to Troas. And a vision appeared to Paul during the night. There stood a man of Macedonia, and asked him, saying, "Come over into Macedonia and help us." And after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia, securely gathering that Adonai had called us to preach the gospel to them. Therefore, loosed from Troas, we came with straight course to Samothracia, and next to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, a colony, and we were in that city abiding certain days. Then on the Shabat we went out of the city by the riverside, where prayer was known to be made. So we sat down and spoke to the women who resorted there, and a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple, of the city of Thyatira, who worshipped Elohim, heard us, whose heart Adonai opened, such that she attended to do the things that were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to Adonai, come into my house and abide there." And she constrained us. And it came to pass, as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, who brought her masters a lot of profit by soothsaying. The same followed Paul and us, and cried, saying, "These men are the servants of the Most High Elohim, who show the way of salvation to us." And she did this for many days. But Paul, becoming grieved, turned and said to her, "I command you in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach to come out of her." And he came out that same hour. And when her masters saw that the hope of their profits were gone, they caught Paul and Silas, and drew them into the marketplace to the rulers, and brought them to the magistrates, saying, "These men, being Yehudim, trouble our city greatly, and they teach customs that are not lawful for us to receive, nor to observe, being Romans." And the multitude rose up against them, and the magistrate tore off his clothes, and commanded to beat them. And when they had laid their stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them securely, who, having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison, and made their feet fastened in the stocks. And at midnight Paul and Silas prayed, and sang praises to Elohim. And the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bounds were loosened. And the keeper of the prison awakened out of his sleep, and seeing the prison doors opened, he drew out his sword, and would have killed himself, supposing that the prisoners had fled. But Paul cried with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." Then he called for a light, and sprang in, and came trembling, and fell down before Paul and Silas, and brought them out, and said, "Sirs, what should I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe on Adonai Yahushua HaMashiach, and you and your household will be saved." And they spoke to him the word of Adonai, and to all who were in his house. And he took them that same hour of the night, and washed their stripes. Then he and all who were his were immediately baptized. And when he had brought them into his house, he set grain before them, and rejoiced, believing in Elohim with all his house. And when it was day, the magistrates sent the officers, saying, "Let those men go." And the keeper of the prison told this, saying to Paul, "The magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore depart now, and go in peace." However, Paul said to them, "They have beaten us, openly condemned, being Romans, and have cast us into prison. And now, do they thrust us out secretly? Truly not. But let them come themselves and fetch us out." So the officers told these words to the magistrates, and they feared when they heard that they were Romans. And they came and besought them, and brought them out, and desired them to depart from the city. And they went out of the prison, and entered into the house of Lydia. And when they saw the brethren, they confronted them, and departed. Chapter 17. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Yehudim. And Paul, as was his manner, went into them, and reasoned with them of the Scriptures for 3 days of shabat, opening and establishing that the Mashiach had to suffer, and rise again from the dead, and that this Yahushua, whom I preach to you, is the Mashiach. And some of them believed, and consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Hellenists a great multitude, and not a few of the chief women. But the Yehudim who did not believe were moved with envy, taking for themselves some lewd fellows of the lower class, and gathering a company, and setting the entire city into an uproar, and assaulting the house of Jason, and seeking to bring them out to the people. And when they did not find them, they drew Jason and some of the brethren to the rulers of the city, crying, "Those who have turned the world upside down have come here also, whom Jason has received. And these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Yahushua." Moreover, they troubled the people and the rulers of the city when they heard these things. So when they had taken security of Jason and the other, they let them go. Then the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea, who coming went into the synagogue of the Yehudim. These were more noble than those of Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all the readiness of mind, and searched the Scriptures daily, whether those things were true. Therefore many of them believed. Also not a few were honorable women and men who were Hellenists. But when the Yehudim of Thessalonica had knowledge that the word of Elohim was preached by Paul at Berea, they came there also, and stirred up the people. Therefore the brethren immediately sent Paul away to go, as it were, to the sea. But Silas and Timothy abode there still, and those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a commandment to Silas and Timotheus to come to him with speed, they departed. Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred within him, when he saw the city completely given to idolatry. Therefore he disputed in the synagogue of the Yehudim, and with the devout people, and in the market daily, with those who met with him. Then some philosophers of the Epicureans and Stoics encountered him, and some said, "What will this babbler say?" Some others said, "He seems to be establishing strange deities, because he preaches Yahushua and his resurrection." And they took him and brought him to Areopagus, saying, "May we know what is this new doctrine that you speak? For you bring some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean." For all the Athenians and strangers who were there spent their time in nothing else, but to either tell or to hear some new things. Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown Elohim, whom you ignorantly worship. I declare him to you. Elohim, that made the world and everything in it, seeing that he is Adonai of the heavens and earth, not dwelling in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with man's hands, as if he needed anything, seeing that he gives life and breath and all things to everyone. Then he made all nations of men from one to dwell on the entire face of the earth. And he has determined the occasions before appointed, and the boundaries of their habitation, so that they will seek Adonai, if they happen to sense him and find him, although he is not far from each of us. For in him we live, and move, and have our being. Also, as some of our own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Therefore, forasmuch as we are the offspring of Elohim, we ought not think that the head of Elohim is like gold, or silver, or stone, which are graven, and man's craftsmanship. Furthermore, Elohim winked at the period of this ignorance, but now he commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance to all men in that he has raised him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, and others said, "We will hear you again on this matter." So Paul departed from among them. Moreover, some men clave to him, and believed, among whom was Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. After these things, Paul departed from Athens, and came to Corinth, and he found a certain Yehudi named Aquila, who had recently come to Italy, with his wife Priscilla, and they came to them because Claudius commanded that all Yehudim depart from Rome. And because he was of the same craft, he abode and worked with them, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Shabbat, and persuaded the Yehudim and the Hellenists. And when Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the spirit, and testified to the Yehudim that Yahushua was Mashiach. And when they oppressed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his raiment and said to them, "Your blood is upon your own heads. I am clean. From here on I will go to the nations." And he departed there, and entered into a certain man's house, named Justus, who worshipped Elohim, whose house joined hard to the synagogue. And Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on Adonai with his entire house. And hearing, some of the Corinthians believed and were baptized. Then Adonai spoke to Paul by a vision during the night. "Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not hold your peace. For I am with you, and no man will set on you to hurt you. For I have many people in the city." And he continued there for 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of Elohim among them. And when Gallio was deputy of Achaia, the Yehudim made an insurrection against Paul with one accord, and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, "This fellow persuades men to worship Elohim contrary to the Torah." Then, when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Yehudim, "If this is a matter of wrong or wicked lewdness, O you Yehudim, why should I carry with you? But if this is a question of words and names, and of your teaching, you look, for I will not be a judge of such matters." And he drove them from the judgment seat. Then all the Hellenists took Sosthenes, the chief ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat. However, Gallio did not care about any of these things. Still, Paul tarried a good while. Then he took his leave of the brethren, and sailed into Aram. Also Priscilla and Aquila was with him. He shaved his head in Cenchrea, for he had a vow. And he came to Ephesus, and left him there, But he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Yehudim. When they desired for him to tarry with them a longer time, he did not consent, but told them farewell, saying, "By all means I must keep this feast that comes in Yerushalayim, but I will return to you again, if Elohim wills." Then he sailed from Ephesus. And when he landed at Caesarea, he went up. Then greeted the assembly, he went down to Antioch. And after he had spent some time there, he departed, and went over the entire country of Galatia and Phrygia in order, strengthening all the Talmudim. And a certain Yehudi named Apollos, born of Alexandria, an eloquent man, mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of Adonai, and being fervent in the Ruach, he spoke and taught diligently the things of Adonai, knowing only the baptism of Yochanan. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, such that when Aquila and Priscilla heard, they took him and explained the way of Elohim more perfectly to him. And when he was disposed to pass into Achaia, the brethren wrote, encouraging the Talmudim to receive him, who, when he had come, greatly helped those who had believed by grace, for he mightily and publicly convinced the Yehudim, showing by the scriptures that Yahushua was Mashiach. Chapter 19. And it came to pass that while Apollos was at Corinth, Paul, passing through the upper borders, came to Ephesus and found some Talmudim. And he said to them, "Have you received the Ruach Kodesh since you believed?" And they said to him, "We have never heard that there is a Ruach Kodesh." And he said to them, "Unto what then were you baptized?" And they said, "Unto Yochanan's baptism." Then Paul said, "Truly Yochanan baptized with the baptism of repentance, saying to the people that they will believe upon him who will come after him, which is upon Yahushua HaMashiach." When they heard this, they were baptized in the name of Adonai, Yahushua. And when Paul laid hands upon him, the Ruach Kodesh came on them, and they spoke with tongues and prophesied, and all the men were about 12. And he went into the synagogue and spoke boldly for the span of 3 months, disputing and persuading the things concerning the kingdom of Elohim. But when unbelievers were hardened and did not believe, but spoke evil of the way before the multitude, he departed from them, and separated the Talmudim, disputing daily in the school of one Tyrannus. And this continued throughout the span of 2 years, so that all those who dwelt in Asia heard the word of Adonai Yahushua, both Yehudim and Hellenists. And Elohim worked special miracles by the hands of Paul, so that from his body handkerchiefs or aprons were brought to the sick, and the diseases departed from them, and evil spirits went out of them. Then some of the vagabond Yehudim, exorcists, took upon themselves, those who had evil spirits, to call upon the name of Adonai Yahushua, saying, "I adore you by Yahushua, whom Paul preaches." And there were 7 sons of Sceva, a Yehudi, chief of the priests, who did so. And the evil spirit answered and said, "Yahushua I know, and Paul I know, but who are you?" And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped upon them, and overcame them, and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of that house naked and wounded. And this was known to all the Yehudim and Hellenists, also dwelling at Ephesus, and fear fell upon them all, and the name of Adonai Yahushua was magnified. And many who believed came and confessed, and told their deeds. Also many of them who had curious arts brought their books together, and burned them before all, and they counted the price of them, and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. So the word of Elohim grew strong and prevailed. After these things were ended, Paul proposed in the Spirit. Then he passed through Macedonia and Achaia to go to Jerusalem, saying, "After I have been there, I must also see Rome." So he sent 2 of those who ministered to him into Macedonia, and Eratus. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season, and that same time there arose no small stir about that way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small profit to the craftsmen, whom he called together with the workmen of similar occupation, and said, "Sirs, you know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone at Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away many people, saying that there are no deities that are made with hands, so that not only is our craft endangered to be set to nothing, but also the temple of the great deity Diana will be despised, and her magnificence will be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worships." And when they heard these things, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." And the whole city was filled with confusion. And having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed into the theater with one accord. And when Paul would have entered in to the people, the Talmudim did not allow him. And some of the chiefs of Asia, who were his friends, sent to him, desiring that he would not advance himself into the theater. Therefore some cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the latter part did not know why they had come together. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude. The Yehudim put him forward, and Alexander beckoned with his hand, and would have made his defense to the people. But when they knew that he was a Yehudi, everyone cried out for about the span of 2 hours with one voice, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, "Men of Ephesus, what man is there that does not know that the city of Ephesus is a worshipper of the great deity Diana, and of that which fell down from Jupiter? Seeing that these things cannot be spoken against, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rashly. For you have brought these men here, who are not robbers of assemblies, not even blasphemers of our deity. Therefore, if Demetrius and the craftsmen who are with him have a matter against any man, the law is open, and there are deputies. But if you inquire anything concerning other matters, it will be determined in a lawful assembly. For we are in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar. There is no reason by which we may give an account of this discourse." And when he had spoken this, he dismissed the assembly. Chapter 20. And after the uproar had ended, Paul called to the Talmudim, and embraced them, and departed to go into Macedonia. And when he had gone over those parts, and gave them a lot of encouragement, he came into Greece, and abode there for 3 months. And when the Yehudim laid wait for him, as he was about to sail into Aram, he intended to return through Macedonia. And Sopater of Berea accompanied him into Asia, and of the Thessalonians, Aristarchus, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timotheus, and of Asia Tychicus, and Trophimus. Going ahead, these tarried for us at Troas. And after the days of unleavened bread, we sailed away from Philippi. Then in 5 days we came to those in Troas, where we abode for 7 days. And upon the first of the week, when the Talmudim came together to break bread, Paul preached to them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. And there were many lights in the upper chamber, where they were gathered together. And a certain man named Eutychus sat in a window, who fell into a deep sleep. And as Paul preached a long time, he sank down with sleep, and fell down from the third loft, and was taken up dead. Then Paul went down, and fell upon him, and embraced him. Do not trouble yourselves, for his life is in him. Therefore he came up again, and broke bread, and ate, and talked a long while, even until the break of day. Then he departed. And they brought the young man alive, and were not a little comforted. Furthermore, he went ahead to the ship, and sailed to Assos, intending to take Paul in there, for he appointed this, thinking to go himself by foot. And when he met with those at Assos, we took him in and went to Mytilene, and we sailed there. And next we came over opposite Chios, and next we arrived at Samos, and tarried at Trogyllium, and next we came to Miletus. For Paul was determined to sail by Ephesus, because he would not spend time in Asia. For he hurries, if it were possible for him to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost. And from Miletus he sent to Ephesus, and called the elders of the assembly. And when they came to him, he said to them, You know from the first day that I came into Asia, after what manner I had been with you at all seasons, serving Adonai with all humility of mind, and with many tears and temptations, which befell me by the ambush of the Yehudim. How I kept nothing that would be beneficial to you, but have showed you, and have taught you publicly, and from house to house, testifying both to the Yehudim and also to the Greeks, repentance toward Elohim, and faith toward our Adonai, Yahushua HaMashiach. And now, behold, I go bound to the Ruach of Jerusalem, not knowing the things that will befall me there, except that the Ruach Kodesh witnesses in every city, seeing that bounds and afflictions are with them. But none of these things move me, nor do I consider my life dear to myself, so that I might finish my course with joy, and the ministry which I have received of Adonai Yahushua, to testify the gospel of the grace of Elohim. And now, behold, I know that you all, among whom I have gone preaching the kingdom of Elohim, will see my face no more. This is why I take you to record this day, that I am pure from the blood of all men. For I have not shunned to declare to you all the counsel of Elohim. Therefore take heed to yourself, and to the entire flock. The Ruach Kodesh has made you overseers, to feed the assembly of Elohim, who he has purchased with his own blood. For I know this, that after my departure, grievous wolves will enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also they will arise of your own selves, speaking perverse things, to draw away Talmudim after themselves. Therefore watch and remember that within the span of 3 years, I did not speak warning every night and day with tears. And now, brethren, I commend you to Elohim and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. I have coveted no man's silver or gold or apparel. Yes, yourselves know that these hands have ministered to my necessities and to those who are with me. I have shown you all things, how that by laboring you ought to support the weak, and to remember the words of Adonai Yahushua, how he said, It is more of a blessing to give than to receive. And when he had spoken this, he knelt down and prayed with them all. And they all wept severely, and fell on Paul's neck, and kissed him, mostly sad for all the words that he spoke, that they will see his face no more. And they accompanied him to the ship. Chapter 21. And it came to pass that after we had gotten from them and had launched, we came with a straight course to Cus, and the following to Rhodes, and from there to Patara. And finding a ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set forth. Now, when we had discovered Cyprus, we left it on the left hand, and sailed into Aram, and landed at Tur. And there the ship was to unload her burden. And finding Talmudim, we tarried there for 7 days, who said to Paul through the Ruach that he will not go up to Jerusalem. And when he had accomplished those days, we departed and went our way. And they all brought us on our way, with wives and children, until we were out of the city. Then we kneeled down on the shore and prayed. And when we had taken our leave one to another, we took ship, and they returned home again. And when we had finished our course from Sur, we came to Ptolemais, and greeted the brethren, and abode with them for a day. And next, we who were of Paul's company departed, and came to Caesarea. And we entered into the house of Philip the evangelist, who was of the 7, and abode with him. And the same man had 4 daughters, virgins, who prophesied. And as we tarried many days, a certain prophet named Agabus came down from Yehuda. And when he had come to us, he took Paul's girdle, and bound his own hands and feet, and said, Thus saith the Ruach Kodesh, so will the Yehudim at Jerusalem bind the man who owns this girdle, and will deliver him into the hands of the nations. And when we heard these things, both we and those of that place requested him not to go to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, What do you mean by weeping and to break my heart? For I am not only ready to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of Adonai Yahushua. And when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, The will of Adonai be done. And after those days we took up our carriages and went up to Jerusalem. Also some of the Talmudim of Caesarea went with us, and brought with them an old Talmudi, Nasan of Cyprus, with whom we lodged. And when we came to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the next day Paul went in with us to Jacob, and all the elders were present. And when he greeted them, he declared particularly what things Elohim had worked among the nations by his ministry. And when we heard it, we glorified Adonai. You see, brother, how many thousands of Yehudim there are believers, and they are all zealous of the teaching. And they are informed of you, that you teach all the Yehudim, who are among the nations, to forsake Moshe, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor walk after the customs. What is it, therefore? The multitude needs come together, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, this that we say to you, we have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take them and purify yourself with them, and be at charges with them, and have vows with them, so that they may shave their heads. And all will know those things that they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you walk orderly. Also keep the Torah. Concerning the nations who believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, except that they only keep themselves from offering to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took the men, and the next day he purified himself with those who entered into the temple, to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until an offering will be offered for each one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Yehudim who were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people, and laid hands upon him, crying out, Men of Yisrael, help! This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against the people, and the Torah, and this place. Furthermore, he brought Hellenists into the temple, and has also polluted this holy place. For they have seen before him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together. And they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came to the chief captain of the band, that all Yerushalayim were in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the chief captain and soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the chief captain came near and took him, and commanded to be bound in 2 chains, and demanded who he was, and what he had done. And some among the multitude cried one thing, some another. And when he could not know the certainty of the uproar, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was carried by the soldiers, because of the violence of the people. Chapter 22. And as Paul was led into the castle, he said to the chief captain, "May I speak to you? You can speak Greek? Are you not that Mitri, who days before this uproar was made, led 4,000 men who were murderers out into the wilderness?" But Paul said, "I am a Yehudi man of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech you, allow me to speak to the people." And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand to the people. And when a great silence was made, he spoke to them in the Ivory tongue, saying, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear my voice, which I make to you now." And when they heard that he spoke in the Ivory tongue to them, they kept the more silent. And he said, "Truly, I am a Yehudi man, born in Tarsus, in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamliel, teaching according to the perfect manner of the Torah of the fathers, and was zealous toward Elohim, as you all are this day. And I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. Also, as the high priest can bear witness of me, and all the estate of the elders, from whom I received letters to the brethren, and went to Damascus, to bring those who were bound there to Jerusalem to be punished. And it came to pass that, as I made my journey and came near to Damascus, around noon, suddenly a great light shined from the heavens around me, and I fell to the ground, and heard a voice saying to me, "Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me?" And I answered, "Who are you, Adonai?" And he said to me, "I am Yehoshua the Nazarite, whom you persecute." And those who were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid. But they did not hear the voice of him whom spoke to me. And I said, "What will I do, Adonai?" Then Adonai said to me, "Arise and go into Damascus, and there it will be told you of all things which are appointed for you to do." And when I could not see, because the glory of the light, I was led by the hand of those who were with me. I came into Damascus, and one, Ananias, a devout man according to the Torah, having a good report of all the Yehudim who dwelt there, came to me, and stood, and said to me, "Brother Shaul, receive your sight." And that same hour I looked up upon him. And he said, "The Elohim of our fathers has chosen you, that you shall know his will, and see the righteous one, and will hear the voice of his mouth. For you will be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now, why do you tarry? Arise, and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on the name of Adonai. And it came to pass that, when I had come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying to me, Make haste, and get yourself quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive your testimony concerning me. And I said, Adonai, they know that I imprisoned and beat those in every synagogue who believed in you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, and consented to his death, and kept the raiment of those who slew him. And he said to me, Depart, for I will send you far from here to the nations. Furthermore, they gave him audience until this word. Then they lifted up their voices and said, Away with this from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and said that he would be examined by scourging, so that he might know why they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard this, he went and told the chief captain, saying, Take heed what you do, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said to him, Tell me, are you a Roman? Then he said, Yes. And the chief captain said, I obtained this freedom with a great sum. Then Paul replied, But I was born. Then they immediately departed from him who would have examined him. Also the chief captain was afraid, after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he bound him. On the next day, because he wanted to know the reason why he was accused by the Yehudim, he loosened him from his bonds, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear. Then he brought Paul down and set him before them. And Paul earnestly beheld the council, said, Men, brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before Elohim until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, Elohim will strike you, whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the Torah, yet command me to be smitten unlawfully. And those who stood by said, You revile the high priest of Elohim? Then Paul said, Brethren, I did not know that he is the high priest. For it is written, You shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. Then Paul perceived that part of them were Zadokim, and the other Berushim. He cried out in the council, Men, brethren, I am a Perushi, the son of a Perushi. I am called in question because of the hope and resurrection of the dead. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Perushim and the Zadukim, and the multitude was divided. For the Zadukim say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor Ruach, but the Perushim confess both. Therefore a great cry arose, and the scribes who were of the Perushim portion arose, and argued, and said, We find no evil in this man. Also, if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against Elohim. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing that Paul would be pulled in pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down, and to take him by force from among them, and to bring him into the castle. And the following night Adonai stood by him, and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified of me in Jerusalem, so too you must bear witness at Rome also. And when it was day, some of the Yehudim banded together, and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would not eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 who had made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will not eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, with the council, signal to the chief captain that he bring him down to you tomorrow, as though you would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. Also, we will be ready to kill him as he comes near." And when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, "Bring this young man to the chief captain, for he has a certain thing to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the chief captain and said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and requested me to bring this young man to you, who has something to say to you." Then the chief captain took him by the hand and went with him aside privately and asked, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Yehudim have agreed to request that you would bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire something of him more perfectly. But do not yield to them, for there is an ambush for him from them. More than 40 men who have bound themselves with an oath that they will not eat nor drink until they have killed him. And now they are ready, looking for a promise from you." Then the captain let the young man depart and charged him, "Tell no man that you have shown these things to me." Then he called 2 centurions, saying, "Make 200 soldiers and 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen ready to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide beasts so that they may set Paul upon, and bring him safely to Felix, the governor." Also he wrote a letter concerning this matter. Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was taken by the Yehudim, and would have been killed by them. Then I came with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason that they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, whom I perceived to be accused by a question of their law. But they have not laid to his charge anything worthy of death or of bondage. And when it was told me how that the Yehudim laid wait for the man, I immediately sent him to you. Also I gave commandment to his accusers to say what they have against him before you. Farewell." Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and took him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they left the horsemen to go with him, and returned to the castle, who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, also presented Paul before him. And when the governor read the letter, he asked of what province he was. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, he said, "I will hear you when your accusers have arrived also." And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest descended with the elders, and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. And when he was called forth, Tertullus began his prosecution, saying, "Great peace has been obtained by you, and worthy deeds are done for this nation by your foresight. In every way and everywhere we accept it, most notable Felix, with all thankfulness. However, not to be a hindrance any longer, I request for you to hear us briefly, with your kindness. For we have found this man to be a pest, and a mover of sedition amongst all the Yehudim throughout the world, and a ringleader of the Nazarim sect. Also, who has gone around profaning the temple, who we had taken, and would have judged according to our law. But the chief captain Lysias came, and took him away out of our hands with great violence, commanding his accusers to come to you, by examining him yourself, taking knowledge of all these things which we accuse him. Also, the Yehudim asserted, saying that these things were true. Then Paul, after that the governor had beckoned him to speak, answered, "For as much as I know that you have been a judge of this nation for many years, I will cheerfully answer for myself, so that you may understand that it is not more than 12 days since I went to Jerusalem to worship. And they did not find me in the temple disputing with any man, nor raising up the people, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city, nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that I follow the way, which they call a sect. Therefore I worship the Elohim of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the Torah and in the prophets. And I have hope toward Elohim, which they themselves also allow, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust. And by this I examine myself, to always have a conscious void of offense toward Elohim and men. Now after many years I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, whereupon certain Yehudim from Asia found me purified in the temple, not with a multitude, nor with an uproar, who ought to be here before you, and object, if they have anything against me, or else let them say the same, if they have found an evil doing in me while I stand before the council. Except it is for this voice that I cried standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am called in question by you this day. And when Felix heard these things, having more perfect knowledge of that way, he deferred them, and said, When Lysias the chief captain comes down, I will know your matter fully. Then he commanded a centurion to keep Paul, and to let him have liberty, and not forbid any of his acquaintance to minister or to come to him. And after certain days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Yehudi woman, he sent for Paul, and heard him concerning the faith of Mashiach. And as he reasoned about righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come, Felix trembled and answered, Go your way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call upon you. Also, he hoped that money would have been given to him by Paul, so that he might loosen him. This is why he sent for and communed with him often. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus came into Felix's room, and Felix, willing to show the Yehudim a pleasure, left Paul in bondage. Chapter 25. Now when Festus had come into the province, and ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem after 3 days, then the high priest and the chief of the Yehudim informed him against Paul, and besought him, and desired favor against him, that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait along the way to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul will be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly. He said, Let those who are able among you go down with me, and accuse this man, if there is any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought down. And when he had come, the Yehudim who came down from Jerusalem stood around, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Yehudim, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended anything at all. But Festus, willing to do the Yehudim a pleasure, answered Paul, and said, Will you go to Jerusalem, and be judged of these things before me there? Then Paul said, I will stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. I have done no wrong to the Yehudim, as you very well know. For if I am offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I would not refuse to die. But if there is none of these things which they accuse me, no man should deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, "You have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you will go." And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause to the king, saying, "There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, about whom I was at Jerusalem. The chief priests and the elders of the Yehudim informed me, requesting to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, 'It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before he is accused face to face with his accuser, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him.' Moreover, when they came here without any delay on the next day, I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth, against whom the accusers stood up. They brought no accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of a Husheo who was dead, whom Paul affirms to be alive. Because I doubted the type of questions, I asked whether he would go to Jerusalem and be judged of these matters. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved to the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept until I might send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "I want to hear the man myself also." "Tomorrow," he said, "you shall hear him." And on the morrow, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp, and entered into the place where the hearing of the chief captains and principal men of the city, Paul was brought forth by the commandment of Festus. And Festus said, "King Agrippa, and all men who are present with us, you see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Yehudim have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I have decided to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write to my lord. Why I have brought him forth before you, and specially before you, O King Agrippa, that after an examination I might have something to write. For it seems unreasonable to me to send a prisoner and not specify the crimes against him." Chapter 26. When Agrippa said to Paul, "You are permitted to speak for yourself," then Paul stretched out his hand and answered for himself. "I consider myself happy, King Agrippa, because I will answer for myself before you today, concerning all the things which I am accused of by the Yehudim, especially because you are an expert in all customs and questions which are among the Yehudim. This is why I ask that you hear me patiently. All the Yehudim know my ways. Since my youth, from the beginning of my life, I was in my own country at Jerusalem, who have known me from the beginning, if they would testify, that I lived according to the most strict sect of our religion, the Perushim. And now I stand and am judged for the hope of the promise made of Elohim to our fathers, unto which our 12 tribes earnestly serve day and night, to have hope. For this hope's sake, King Agrippa, I am accused of by the Yehudim. Therefore it will be thought an incredible thing to you that Elohim will raise the dead. Verily, I myself thought that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Yehoshua the Nazarite. Also I did this thing in Jerusalem, and I shut up many of the saints in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. And when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them, and I punished them often in every synagogue, and compelled them to blaspheme. And being very mad against them, I even persecuted at strange cities, upon which I went to Damascus with authority and commission from the chief priests. At midday, O king, I saw along the way a light from the heavens above. The brightness of the sun shined around me and those who sojourned with me. And when we had fallen to the earth, I heard a voice speak to me and say in the Hebrew tongue, Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me? Is it hard for you to kick against the pricks? And I said, Who are you, Adonai? And he said, I am Yahushua, whom you persecute. But arise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to make you both a minister and a witness of these things which you have seen, and of these things in which I will appear to you, delivering you from the people and the nations of which I now send you, to open their eyes, to turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Hashatan to Elohim, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins, and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith that is in me. Whereupon, O King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision, but showed first to those of Damascus, and at Jerusalem, and throughout all the borders of Yehuda, and to the nations, who will repent and turn to Elohim, and do works deserving of repentance. For these causes the Yehudim caught me in the temple, and went about to kill me. Moreover, having obtained the help of Elohim, I continued to this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying nothing other than what the prophets and Moshe said would come, that the Mashiach would suffer, that he would be the first who would raise from the dead and show light to the people and to the nations. And as he spoke this for himself, Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you are beside yourself. Much learning makes you mad. But he said, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak out the words of truth and soberness. For the king, before whom I speak freely, knows of these things also. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe. Then Agrippa said to Paul, You almost persuaded me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would to Elohim that not only you, but also all who hear me this day were both almost and completely such as I am, except these bonds. And when he had spoken this, the king and the governor and Bernice and those who sat with them rose up. And when they had gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, This man has not done anything worthy of death or of bondage. Then Agrippa said to Festus, This man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed to Caesar. Chapter 27. And when it was decided that we would sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coasts of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go to his friends to refresh himself. And when he had launched from there, we sailed beneath Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us in it. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarcity came over against us, the wind not suffering us, we sailed beneath Crete, over against Salmon, and hardly passing it came to a place that is called the fair havens. The city of Lasea was near there. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with injury and much damage, not only of the load and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not a good place to winter in, the larger part advised to leave there also, if by any means they might reach Venice to winter, which is a haven of Crete, and lies toward the southwest and northwest. And when the southern wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their intention, loosening anchor, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, a turbulent wind rose up against it, called northeastern. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her dive. And running under a certain island, which is called Claudia, we had much work to come by the lifeboat, which when they had taken it up, they used supports, undergirding the ship. And fearing lest they would fall into the quicksands, struck sail and were driven. And by being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And we cast out with our own hands a third of the ship's tackling. And when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and it was not a small tempest laid upon us, then all hope that we would be saved was taken away. But after a long abstinence, Paul stood out in the midst of them and said, Sirs, you should have hearkened to me, and not set loose from Crete, and to have received this harm and loss. And now I encourage you to be of good cheer, for there will be no loss of any man's life among you, only the ship. For an angel of the Elohim, whose I am, and whom I serve, stood by me this night, saying, Fear not, Paul, you must be brought before Caesar. And lo, Elohim has given you all these who sail with you. Therefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe Elohim that it will be even as it was told me. However, we must cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night had come, as we were driven up and down in Andrai, about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded, and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had come a little further, they sounded again, and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing that we would fall upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under the pretense that they were casting an anchor out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldier, Unless you stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought everyone to take grain, saying, Today is the 14th day that you have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing. Therefore I pray you to take grain, for this is for your health. For a hair from the head of any of you will not fall. And when he spoke this, he took bread and gave thanks to Elohim in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all of good cheer. Also they took grain. And in all the ship we were 276 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they did not know the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they considered thrusting the ship, if it were possible. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed to the sea, and loosened the rudder bonds, and hoisted up the mainsail for the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into the space where the two seas met, they ran the ship aground. And the front part struck fast, and remained unmoved. But the back part was broken with the violence of waves. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them would swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their intention, and commanded that those who would swim will cast themselves first and get to land, and the rest, some on boards, and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they all escaped safely to land. Chapter 28. And when they escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received everyone, because of the present rain, and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, a viper came out of the heat and fastened to his hand. And when the barbarians saw the beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom, although he has escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffers not to live." But he shook off the beast into the fire, and felt no harm. However, they watched when he would swell, or fall down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while, and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds, and said that he was an Elohim. In the same quarters were possessions of the chief men of the island, whose name was Publius, who courteously received and lodged us for 3 days. And it came to pass that the father of Publius laid sick with a fever, and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed, and laid his hands upon him. So when this was done, others also, who had diseases in the island, came and were healed, also who honored us with many honors. And when we departed, they laid in us with many things as were necessary. And after 3 months, we departed into a ship of Alexandria, which was wintered in the island, whose sign was Castor and Polis. And landing in Syracuse, we tarried for 3 days. And from there we fetched a compass, and came to Rhegium. And after 1 day, the south wind blew, and the next day we came to Puteoli, where we found brethren, and where we were requested to tarry with them for 7 days. And then we went toward Rome. And from there, when the brethren heard of us, they came to meet us as far as the Opiforum and the 3 taverns, which when Paul saw, he thanked Elohim and took courage. And when he came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard. But Paul was allowed to dwell by himself with a soldier who kept him. And it came to pass, after 3 days, Paul called the chief of the Yehudim together. And when they came together, he said to them, "Men, brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people, or customs of our fathers, yet I was delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans, who, when they had examined me, would have let me go, because there is no cause of death in me. But when the Yehudim spoke against it, I was constrained to appeal to Caesar, not that I ought to accuse my nation. Therefore, for this cause I have called for you, to see you and to speak with you. Because of the hope of Yeshareal, I am bound with this chain." And they said to him, "We never received letters out of Yehuda concerning you, nor has any brethren come, showing or speaking any harm of you. But we desire to hear of you what you think. For concerning this sect, we know that it is spoken against everywhere." And when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he explained and testified the kingdom of Elohim, persuading them concerning Yahushua, both out of the teaching of Moshe and the prophets, from morning until evening. And some believed the things which were spoken, and some did not believe. But when they did not agree amongst themselves, they departed, after that Paul had spoken one word. And when they did not agree amongst themselves, they departed after Paul spoke the final word. The Ruach Kodesh spoke the truth of Yahushua by the prophets to our fathers, saying, Go to this people, and say, Hearing you will hear, but not understand, and seeing you will see, but not perceive. For the heart of this people has become gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and they have closed their eyes, lest they will see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and will be converted, and I will heal them. Therefore, be it known to you that the salvation of Elohim is sent to the nations, and that they will hear it. And when he had said these words, the Yehudim departed, and had great reasoning among themselves. And Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his own hired house, and received all who came in to him, preaching the kingdom of Elohim, and teaching those things concerning Adonai Yahushua HaMashiach, with all confidence, no man forbidding him. The end. Thank you for listening to my interpretation of Acts. I hope that you find my Bible series, Khureb BeRuakh, Sword of the Spirit, enlightening. The word of Yahweh is a treasure trove of mysteries. It's amazing what you'll discover when you read it with your eyes open. My name is Wendy, and you've been called out of darkness